American culture has a long history of changing the stories of survivors to better fit its own self-serving agenda, and it is well documented that the United States government systematically released false public propaganda while stealing land from the original inhabitants of this country. American culture is a culture built on harms inflicted against both groups and individuals, and rape culture is a significant part of those historical roots. The effects of rape culture are much farther wrought than what we see within the confines of gendered dialogue. Before we get started with today's segment, we seek to respectfully honor the land currently called the United States of America and its original inhabitants. As we honor our Earth and Native peoples, please consider the ways that reconciling rape culture within yourself will contribute to dismantling the harm caused against both groups and individuals through the overuse and exploitation of resources for monetary gain. We gather here today on Turtle Island, the indigenous term for the North American continent. The Earth is our greatest resource, and Turtle Island is rich with cultures that nurtured and protected our Earth for all. To the east, in New York City, the land of the Lenape, the river that flows both ways, was home to abundant natural resources and well-developed communities. The original infrastructure of the Lenape peoples can still be seen in the map of modern Manhattan. The Lenape are still here, now called the Delaware Nation, and located throughout New Jersey, Oklahoma, and Canada. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Delaware Nation, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. In Washington, D.C., we are gathered on the unceded land of the Piscataway, Lumbee, and Cherokee peoples. The Piscataway, called the people where the rivers blend, were farmers, many revered for their hunting and fishing skills, and their well-established communities that stretched to and through Baltimore, the Chesapeake Bay, and Virginia. The Piscataway are still here, and the Piscataway peoples still preserve their native traditions, customs, and memories as seen through Piscataway eyes. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Piscataway community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. To the south, Puerto Rico, called the island of Boriken by the Taino and Arawakan peoples, remains an unceded, unincorporated territory of the United States. The Arawakan were complex in culture, social structure, and spirituality, with democratically determined governing systems and matriarchal households. And the Taino introduced European settlers to many implements still used in modern living. The Taino peoples are still here, the great people of the sacred high waters, and they continue to preserve their tribal traditions, spiritual practices, and cultural heritage, while seeking recognition as the authentic people of the island of Boriken. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Taino community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. To the west, California is home to more people of Native heritage than any other state in the United States. There are currently 109 federally recognized Indian tribes in California, and 78 entities petitioning for recognition. In the greater Los Angeles, there are 14 federally recognized tribes, and the land is still home to 3 federally unrecognized tribes that predate the establishment of the California missions: the Chumash, Tongva, and Tataviam peoples. The Chumash peoples consisted of a diverse conglomeration of autonomous settlements that existed along the coast since before 7000 BCE, and were known as bead makers, herbalists, artists, and basket weavers. The Chumash are still here, and continue to preserve their myths and legends while promoting sustainable agriculture and healthy diets within their community and beyond. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Chumash community, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. To the north, the indigenous peoples of Canada are the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations. The indigenous cultures of Canada are vast and far-reaching, and had formed complex social, political, economic, and cultural systems long before Europeans came to North America. In 2016, more than 1.6 million Canadians identified as Indigenous, and the population steadily grows thanks to increased life expectancy, higher birth rates, and the ongoing work of reconciliation being carried out in recent years. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Indigenous cultures of our Turtle Island, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. While a land acknowledgement is not enough to stand alone as a decolonial social justice tool, it serves as a reminder that we are on sacred land. Indigenous Americans, with cultures just as vast and diverse as those named here today, have acted as stewards of the sacred lands of Turtle Island, our forests, rivers, and meadows, for over 14,000 years, maintaining the balance of the earth for all beings on this planet. Enslaved Africans used their own hands, sweat, and blood to build the American economy as we currently know it. By acknowledging this history, we can find truthful relations, both to ourselves and our Earth, and will more effectively shape the future of this and other planets. Colonization is still an ongoing process, and native lands are still occupied due to broken treaties, practices of eminent domain, and other mechanisms intended solely for the benefit of government or corporate America. May our actions today work to reconcile the repeated violations of rape culture in order to create a safer world for our next 7 generations.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, good. I am off mute. Hi, James. How are you?
Good, how's it going?
Pretty good. Is it you, me, and Tamika tonight?
Looks like it might be just us.
Hmm. Oh, okay. I just got a message saying that everybody is. There are a couple people joining late.
Excellent.
So I guess that we can go ahead and start since I'm not quite sure when everybody's going to be there, and Tamika will jump in when she comes back. So the kind of topic tonight is, sort of the concepts and ideas just around like sex and being sex positive. So like, I don't know, when I think of like sex positivity, like I guess I think of, really engaging with sex and the idea of sex, like without the shame that is often thrown. Hi, Tamika.
Hi, everyone.
Hey,
I'm driving tonight, heading south to see my mom. She has tested positive for COVID, and I'm heading south to make sure everything is okay.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry to hear that, but I'm glad that we're going to go down and be with her.
Yes, definitely. That's the last parent I have alive. I need to make sure that she's still alive.
Mm-hmm. She's the last one of your family, the last family member you said that is still alive?
She's one of the last elders.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all of my father and his siblings are all gone.
Yeah.
And then that leaves my mom and her siblings as the elders in the family now from both sides.
Wow. Yeah, no, that makes a huge difference. Well, I hope that. Hi, Sue.
Hi. Turn left onto Oasis Drive, then turn right onto Virginia 236 East.
On our way to go see her mom.
Take the next right onto Virginia 236 East, Virginia 613 South, then use the right lane to take the I-395 South ramp.
Sorry.
That's all right. sweet. No, always having those conversations. Tamika just said, I don't know if you caught that before you popped on, Sue. She's driving south tonight to go see her mom because she just found out she tested positive for COVID. So I think, yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And she was kind of just talking about, and like wanting to go and spend time. Her mom being one of the last elders that, she has. So I guess the question that kind of popped up on the screen before you, oh, there it is again, is like, we're sort of talking about the ideas of sex positivity. And I didn't like unload very much other than to just say, like, to me, I feel like when I think of sex positivity, I think of like engaging with sex and sexual concepts without shame. I think of like destigmatizing sex work and like supporting sex workers. I think of, sort of going hand in hand with, the like equal rights, but the opportunity to just for everybody to love and like, have sex with whoever they love and want to have sex with. And also like, I think probably the concepts of enthusiastic consent around sex positivity too. I don't know. What about you guys?
Well, for me,
I definitely can get.
oh no, go ahead, Tamika.
Continue on I-395 south for 1 mile.
Okay. I don't know who should talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a complicated question, sex positivity, because I think that once we as a society starts accepting sex work as real work, then sexual victimization would lessen, right? And so for me, because I've worked with a lot of sex trafficked victims, when they hear about sex positivity, they think it's not a good thing. And it's because they have been sex trafficked, forced into this unconsensually. And so I would explain that if we take a legal stance, then trafficking women would stop because there's legality behind it and there isn't stigmatization. So like for me, I had personally worked on relocating someone, an indigenous woman, an indigenous Myanmar woman who was sex trafficked. And when she was sex trafficked from my country of Myanmar to Thailand, and she was raped by Myanmar military people and a numerous amount of people in Thailand and expatriates or white Americans that go into Thailand for sex. And so she had a child who she conceived from the military. And from that, he started to look like her victim, like her victimizer. He's the one who got her hooked on heroin so that she would continue to be a prostitute without her consent. And so that the child started looking like the rapist. And so she could not ethically raise him without, she didn't want to be mean to him, but it was triggering. So I had to help to relocate her son. And when she heard about, Western people being very like, yeah, gung-ho about like sex positivity, people like that would get hurt behind it because like that wasn't consensual. But what needs to be explained is that like consent is very important. So that's what stops things like this. Underground trafficking of indigenous people all over the world, including America. And so that is, and everyone else too. Like, so that's my 2 cents. I think it's a complicated question. So I can see from other people that are opposed to sex positivity, why they're opposed to it. But I think it's because there's a miscommunication within the term sex positivity, you know?
Absolutely. Differences in sort of, what we think when we hear sex positivity, like based on our own experiences. But I absolutely agree with what you're saying earlier about like really like if we decriminalize and support sex work, like so much of trafficking, so much sex work, you know, really I think like it would go a long way toward curbing the epidemics that we're seeing all over the world, like in terms of sex trafficking and culture. Hi, Melly. Hi, Steph.
Hi.
Hi. I was having some trouble getting in the room. I'm glad to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when I hear sex positivity, I know a lot of people get confused and think that it means promiscuity, and that you're just having sex all the time with anybody whenever. Which, if that's what you want to do and you have consensual partners, hey, go for it. Um, but people were so confused by it because they don't understand consent, and they don't understand somebody wanting to do something and choosing who they do it with and what the acts will be. And there's so much puritanical energy just wrapped up in all the institutions in the US, including the government. Most of our laws were based on religious dictates, and a lot of it conservative Christian over the decades. And that's why people are so hung up on somebody owning their own sexuality and doing what they want with willing, consensual partners who are capable of meaningful consent. Mm-hmm. As somebody who was my rapist was a woman, and that throws a lot of people off, and they don't understand how a man cannot want to be with a woman at any time. And it just takes a lot of discussing what consent is, because consent is completely broken in this country. It's not taught in any meaningful way. Health classes don't really cover it because we have so many political and religious groups that just don't want you talking about it in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
James, I see
so when I hear sex positive, I immediately start thinking about women are being slut shamed for dressing a certain way and using that as a justification for them being raped and abused. It also makes me think about how people are talking negatively about people that have sex with their own gender. You know, it's the weirdest thing how American culture is okay with lesbianism, but it's not okay with homosexuality. You know, Jerry Springer has that saying of "We love lesbians," but you never hear them say anything about homosexual sex. You know, it's lesbian sex. That's different. That's like a fantasy for men. You know, but when it comes to the homosexual sex, that's where we get this negativity and all this down low conversation, and these men that are afraid to come out of the closet or because of being stigmatized as being soft. And I don't see it that way. You know, I look at people who are homosexual, LGBTQ, as the strongest people in the world, because we have to take a lot of shit from people. I have taken ample shit from people, and it's been used against me as a way for them to justify them raping me. You know, oh well, you're gay, you like that. You know, no one likes to be raped.
No.
So that's what I think about when I think about sex positivity, is the negativity that people put upon someone for enjoying themselves.
I think like an important aspect that you brought up, Tamika and James, is like the difference between being sexual and being sexualized. And I think, you know, as a young Asian woman, I'm like oftentimes hypersexualized just based on, you know, how I present myself. And being sexualized means that no matter what you do, is perceived as sexual. You can be like just walking down the street and someone will say that you're acting promiscuous just by walking, you know. And especially in my workplace, right? Like, I don't feel comfortable coming out as bisexual to my clients and to my coworkers if I am not in a sex positive environment, because I don't want people to think like, you know, am I coming out because I'm inviting them for like some sort of some sort of crossing of my boundaries and inviting them to see me in a sexual light. So it's I think that's what is important in terms of understanding how sex positive environments can help like people feel safer in expressing their sexuality without sexualizing them as an object.
Yeah. Consent to, right? Like, it's not something that you have any say in whatsoever. And so it sort of moves back to that, like, being sex positive is like you're jumping in and you're owning it and it's yours, and, you know, being very fuck yes about it. But like, you know, with being sexualized, like, you have no say in that. That's something that people, you know, do to and put on you. And I just sort of saw the question pop up around um like, how does the media, like, what is the media's role in perpetuating rape culture? You know, and rape culture, I think, like, stands in opposition to sex positivity, because sex positivity is all about consent and rape culture is, you know, all about the absence of it. But I'll move that over, because I'm sure we can all talk for a long time about how the media, you know, the media sort of portrays that. You know, in every way, from like half of our like stories that we like hear from the time that we're like little, you know, that are basically like Stockholm syndrome and like kidnapping and, you know, all manner of, you know, and it's a like a young and silly sort of example, but like it's so deeply ingrained that like even our children's stories are shaped within that way. I don't know, do you guys have, you know, other thoughts and feelings around like how the media sort of shapes rape culture? I mean, going back to sexualization, right? The media sexualizes, you know, that's pretty much all women are in the media, you know, is sexual objects, like used to, you know, sell just about everything. You know, and really seen, you know, almost as like an advertising prop, like bodies in a certain way, not even as people.
Yeah, and so what I would like to say about that is that conversely, for cis men, they're treated like they're always supposed to want sex, right? Like, no matter what, like, this is what they're after, and this is like what they're supposed to chase. So it becomes this like a hunter-hunted paradigm, right? And so if a man is raped, like James was saying, that's confusing for the, you know, for authority figures or other folks to understand if you're reporting a rape. You know, same thing with like with women. You know, 16 Candles had a rape scene. You know, there's like so many different movies that portray that women are supposed to be this like feeble thing to chase after, right? And like cis men are supposed to be the one chasing after them. And that paradigm hurts both sides, you know, and the folks trapped in the middle that are non-binary too. So like, I don't know. It doesn't make sense for the media to teach one thing and then for this new positivity type of drive that's going on, you know, because in one sense in the media, yes, like I think it's amazing for people to dress however they want to, and but also to not have that expectation if they don't want to either, you know? And I know that young people are very impressionable, and if they are exposed to culture that is the opposite of consent, then that's what they're going to end up doing. That's what's raising them. That's what's shaping their paradigm, and that's all within patriarchy. So if when we talk about rape culture, dismantling rape culture, we have to dismantle patriarchy, or else it's irrelevant. So that's my 2 cents.
No, 100% on that. Like, and patriarchy is the root of so much of it. Patriarchy and capitalism, which go hand in hand, right? Like, turning people into commodities, and that system of observation and system of viewing people, like you said, on all sides, like, as not really people, more like as caricatures, as roles that they're supposed to be playing, right?
Yeah, and I think that, like, for example, people learn about sex through porn, and I don't think porn is necessarily bad, but I think that um, the people that had the most control of porn were white men that were cis. So you can see racism, like Asian gets fucked by so and so, like, and then they have exoticization. There's so many other things, but now there's different platforms where people um, that are trying to consensually present themselves in that way, they can do that without it being racist, sexist, or homophobic. Like OnlyFans, like that is like changing the movement, because now people are able to make money the way they want to. you know for bi men, it's very difficult after they have sex with a man because of homophobia to go back into having sex with women in porn. Like, they're seen as gay now, right? But that doesn't make any sense. So things like that. I think that, like, when we talk about media, we also need to talk about what teaches our children. And most people learn about sex not through sex ed, but through porn. And so that is another aspect of it as well.
And even like you mentioned teaching our children, I'm just thinking about what Disney taught me growing up, right? Like Sleeping Beauty, that was so weird that like just someone who's sleeping and like someone can just kiss that person, and that is okay, and that is a happy ending, right? Like that kind of stuff is so ingrained within our psyche that we don't think twice about it. And then when we grow up, that's like the type of stuff that we kind of I guess like that's like what that's what comes out. That's exactly what happens when we are taught that as children, that this is okay and this is what love should look like. And that is really sad. And I think that you brought up a really good point about how porn teaches children how to have sex, because we don't teach that in school. We don't teach what consent is. We don't teach what like good and positive sex is. So yeah, I love your points too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think those are really good points.
Yeah, I do a bystander intervention training every week on a military base, and I have anywhere between 75 and 125-year-old, 17 to 20-year-olds, and they literally know nothing at all. Nothing about consent. They don't really understand the concept. They're getting it for the very first time when they're sitting in front of me. I say kids because they're still basically kids in adult bodies mentally by the time they've arrived there straight out of basic training and the combat training after that. And it's sad we're sending them out into the world without a basis for understanding proper behavior, how to obtain consent, what consent actually looks like. They don't get any of it because no one's ever bothered to actually sit down and do a really basic understanding and teaching of this. And we wait till they're an adult to try to get this into their head.
Mm-hmm.
and undo a decade or more of their teenage years and their early tween years of not getting anything.
Yeah.
It's
And I think, like, you know, like, we talk about relationships and we talk about consent, and like we are taught consent through our media, but like the consent that we're taught is like, keep pushing until somebody says yes, not like, oh, you said no, okay, let me step back. Like, oh, I said no, that means no, that's it. We're not taught that at all. We're taught, like, you know, be relentless in your pursuit, and to like push through that. Like, no, like a boundary is like a barrier to be overcome. So like, you know, I think, and you know, I know that pornography like certainly has so many of those kinds of tropes, right? And particularly as there's become, you know, and I'm talking about, you know, not OnlyFans, but like pornography that is generally speaking like created by white men, like has so many of those tropes, and really like continues to escalate, I think, in that way, because people become desensitized, and so they need things that are more intensive. And, you know, I'm not about yucking anybody's yum, like, you know, have your kinks consensually, but like, I think that, you know, just in terms of how we're taught the negotiation of sex, it's very much, you know, a like, no, I'm just going to push through until I get what I want. And like, that's supposed to be flattering, and that's supposed to make, you know, you on the receiving end of it feel good. And, you know, I think that, you know, we can internalize that too, right? Like, somebody's supposed to be aggressively pursuing me. And so like, you know, it feels good to be wanted in that way, even if I'm question mark about what I'm, you know, what I want to do. We're taught that, you know, somebody pushing past your boundaries is actually like an expression of desire and of want and care, which I think, you know, we see that manifest in so many different ways within relationship.
I think that goes into that victim blaming culture as well, right? Like this idea that, well, he was just where they were just trying to pursue me, and they were just trying to, you know, make me feel wanted, right? Like this is what I think last time we talked about, with the confusion that comes with being sexually harassed or assaulted. It's like, you know, I know in my body that did not feel right. And I know that I was not consenting to that, of my boundaries being crossed. But society and the media and everything else is telling me that this is okay. And so that's where this like dissonance is coming in, and it makes it really hard for us to overcome the trauma that comes with being sexually assaulted, when we're not able to fully process that, when we're feeling that confusion and blaming of ourselves.
Yeah, 100%.
It just seems like, to me, it's all focused on the act of sex. There's zero intimacy, there's no passion. It's just attaining the act of the sex that people are so fascinated with, that they're forgetting that there are other elements to it. Where's the romance to it? You know, even as a sex worker, I have to build certain things in to keep my clients interested. But I try not to rush to the sex. Let's have a conversation. How are you doing? You know, build a rapport with people. You know, and that's where we have such a disconnect in this country, is that we're not teaching intimacy. It's the act of sex itself that people are pushing for.
Oh, there we go. I'm muted. We sort of touched on this a little bit earlier, but can kind of, you know, unpack it like, you know, as it as it comes to sex work, like, I suppose my, like, perception is that I really feel like sex work is healing work. Like, it is, you know, a connection, sort of speaking to what you were saying, Tamika, like, it's connection. There's a level and degree of intimacy there. And so, like, criminalizing sex work really deprives people of, like, what is a basic human need, right? To connect, right? Whether that is through, you know, I know that sex isn't, like, necessarily a drive. It's not like hunger or thirst. We don't die without it, but, like, we do die without touch. We do die without connection. And for a lot of people, you know, I mean, even babies, right? Like, who don't connect, you know, or have a parent, a mother who's sick when they're born, end up, like, with failure to thrive. Like, they literally shut down without human touch and human connection. And we're not any different as adults. And so criminalizing sex work, you know, leaves a lot of people without an avenue to have that kind of connection, you know, and to have it safely, and to have it in a way that, you know, like, meets them where they're at, and you know, meets needs. And so I think that directly contributes to rape culture, because, like, you know, you have all of these people with these unmet needs, with these feelings of lack, with these, like, you know, this lack of touch, this lack of that connection, and that fosters, you know, all manner of, um, you know, sort of like toxic mindsets and mentality, right? Like scarcity mentality.
Yeah. And also, like, if you criminalize sex work, then other jobs also get affected. Like me as a medical massage therapist, I'm not a sex worker and I do not shame sex workers, but I do not want to be seen as a sex worker. And so um, there's a incident that happened in Ashburn, Virginia, where I was asked to come in for a second verification that I'm not a prostitute, which is crazy. So I went in because I took an FBI background check and they said they needed a second background check. And so I went, and when I went, it was all Asian women lined up. And we were asked questions like, what part of the body do you massage with? Uh, you know, like, I'm a medical massage therapist. I'm not sexual with my patients, but you know, there's that aspect in there. And the fact that I am Asian and I am indigenous, it's easier to sexualize because of exoticism. And also, like, I've been sexually assaulted at work numerous times, where when I used to have dreadlocks, which was last year and like the year before, and I would go to work, there was this one man who grabbed my hair and pushed me and undraped himself, pushed me towards his dick and said, "Bitch, suck my dick." And that, you know, and I tried to call the cops and I had to quit that job because they wouldn't let me report. Um, and also the same police officers that was questioning if I was a prostitute or not, um, blamed me and said that it's because, you know, I'm very sexual. And I don't think there's anything sexual about being a massage therapist. And that is what criminalizing sex work does. You know, it perpetuates um, this type of um, like racism, where like Asian women or like women of color or like trans women, like these like niche people that like people want to victimize, and it's okay for them to victimize because this is seen as illegal work, and so then you, the victim, automatically become doing something illegal, and so that goes into a cycle. um the same thing what Tamika was saying, with her being a sex worker, there needs to be a safe avenue for her. It's not okay for people to get charged. You know, what you do with your body is up to you. And so this is ridiculous. This type of behavior just feeds off patriarchy and just continues and eats away at other people, not only sex workers, but all people. women and men and non-binary folks and agender folks. So that's my 2 cents. I'm losing my voice. Just came back from a protest, so bear with me. Sorry, guys.
I agree that like what you do with your body is your choice. Like I know I have friends who have OnlyFans, and they almost do the exact same thing that a getting paid, and they're not getting locked up, and they have other jobs. They're accountants or they're teachers and stuff like that. So why can they do it and film it and get paid when other people can't? Like, what is are watching? Like, what you do with your body is.
You're cutting out a little bit, Steph. But it sounds like, you know, what you're saying is like people have avenues with like OnlyFans and they're getting paid, and like, why are sex workers not being paid? Like, it is work all within the same vein, and like this like breakdown of categorization, like, well, this is okay, but this thing that's right next to it is not, because of some, I don't know, arbitrary puritanical patriarchy that's like, oh no, the only people that can be in charge of like, you know, people's bodies is the government, which is some bullshit, but like that is, you know, that is the root of our country, like all the way back down. Like, you don't get to decide what to do with your body, but like, you know, the government can tell you what to do with it or what not to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like by criminalizing sex work, it's telling sex workers that they don't deserve protection. That because they're engaged in this work, then anytime they get assaulted, anytime that they get physically assaulted, like, you know, they can't call the police for help, because they're engaging in this work, then they should know that like and that they deserve the like the punishments and the assaults. And I think that just shows like the government's perception of what sex is, you know, of like what sex should be like, where we are not able to claim our bodies, and we're not able to say that, you know, just because I'm exchanging money for sex, like I'm able to have the same basic human rights. And I think like when we put it into that context, then, you know, sex trafficking can become so much easier, where people are not consenting to being sex workers, and it's because that they're not going to get the protection from the police, and there's not going to be any accountability and consequences for the people of sex trafficking them.
Yeah, so like globally, for example, when Latinx women get taken, for example, from Colombia to Japan to be sex workers, they usually prosecute and criminalize these sex traffic victims, but the smugglers, the pimps, the gangs that are affiliated with it, like Yakuza, nothing happens. So this is like a global problem where sex trafficking is attributed with sex being illegal. Prostitution being illegal. And so, like, you know, when one starts to be addressed, then the other will be, you know?
That's why I work so hard to decriminalize sex work. You know, because of the victims of trafficking. Why are you arresting a victim? That makes absolutely no sense. Why are you criminalizing someone that is being coerced into doing sex work? It's different if I'm out here doing it of my free will. You know, I shouldn't be criminalized for that either. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous to be monitoring people's casual sex tendencies when casual sex is something that is celebrated so long as it's a man doing it. Men can go in bed 1,000 women and they're celebrated. But let a woman do the same thing, she's slut shamed. I'm not a slut. I am a sexual being, just like everyone else. And for government to continue to steal my autonomy and agency over how I choose to use my body is ridiculous. They don't have those type of regulations on people that play hockey. They go out there and they physically abuse each other. Boxing, physical abuse. It's the same thing. You're using your body to gain money. But you criminalize me for using my body to gain money because I'm having sex. Go figure.
Yeah, that's like such a powerful like illustration and comparison, right? About the kind of body, the kind of work with our bodies that is condoned and the kind of work that is not. And like playing hockey, right? Or contact sports, like you think about football players who are getting paid like millions of dollars and like literally breaking their brains, like altering themselves in a way physically that like they cannot come back from. And then you think of sex work, which is, people like engaging in something that doesn't hurt, it actually helps, is criminalized, while, people breaking their bodies, like most often, by POC people, like to sort of that juxtaposition of like, healing is not okay, but like breaking, absolutely, that's fine.
It's the strangest thing how people could lust for seeing blood. But let that blood come from a sex worker. Oh, well, you shouldn't have been out there. No, that's not how that works. If a football player breaks a bone while they're playing football, oh, he's a hero. They're so strong and courageous. Let me live through a rape. Well, if you weren't out there, if you weren't wearing a mini skirt, if you weren't out here sex working, maybe that wouldn't have happened to you. It's a double standard that shouldn't exist.
And also, like going back to the trafficking, like there's a story of this woman who was kidnapped. She's an indigenous person from my country, from Myanmar, and she was kidnapped and shipped to China. And so we were looking for her for a really long time, and her sister was also kidnapped. And so when we finally found her in Xijing province, her legs were broken, so she couldn't escape. Like, this is the level of violence I'm talking about. She's given birth to over 10 children, and her sister is totally gone and missing. So her sister, we don't know. And we think they killed her. And so this is the result of sex trafficking. Same thing with indigenous people here. There's a Lumbee woman that was in Baltimore. I was working with the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women movement. And because they're stuck in this loophole of not being considered real citizens, the Native American police cannot press charges to non-Native Americans. So if it's a non-Native American, usually white men, that go into those spaces and rape women or like abduct them, kidnap them, do whatever they want, and dump their bodies, there's nothing being done about it. The FBI is like, oh, that's the Native American police job. The Native American police are tied with litigation, so there's thousands of women missing and murdered. With the Lumbee woman, we were putting pressure for Baltimore police, Baltimore County Police, and finally they found her body. Finally. That was 3 years ago. And so like that's totally ridiculous, and that is the direct result of criminalizing sex work. It's a direct result of not teaching consent, of, as a collective, not holding people accountable. Because when you let these small things slip, then there's these major things that happen. And then now we're like, oh, this is a problem because there's a body attached to it. It shouldn't get to that. And one race, one gender, or no gender should not be held less sexual or more accountable or less accountable. Everyone should be accountable for their own actions, period. So yeah, that's what I would like to say.
What really struck me about that story, Sue, was like just how much it gets swept under the rug, even when there is a body, even when there is that physical violence. Because, you know, the biggest barrier in reporting, right, is that like the police minimizes the harm that's done. It's like, okay, well, you know, especially with stalking, right? That's a great example because I've worked with a lot of women who have shows me all these text messages about being stalked, about being like threatened harm, but then unless there's actual harm to them, like the police doesn't do anything. They tell you to keep a record, but then they don't really do anything. There's no report being made. And even in this case, with when there is a body, when there is like physical violence, and the police is still sweeping it under the rug. And it just shows how much, just like as a society in general, I guess, that we're sweeping this like sexual assault as something that we turn a blind eye to, and we don't want to address it. And that's why that it's been building up for so long. And I think we are maybe at the point of it tipping over, you know, like more and more people are starting to speak out about it, which is great, but we still have so much work to do.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of police, and I am doing everything I can to defund them and to replace them with, you know, mobile intervention squads that operate under the same type of premise of EMTs and fire officials roaming the city to address those type of things. Because the police are not going to come in and actually do anything. There's a better chance of an intervention squad coming in and mitigating some of those issues and being a lot more sympathetic to victims.
So I'm going to read the question. How do men's rights intersect with rape culture? So for me, there was a men's rights activist who assaulted a friend of mine who's a permaculture teacher. And he was saying that it's his right. Um, you know, he blocked her from leaving. He made her feel uncomfortable. She asked him to move away. He didn't move. So she pushed him so she could leave. Right. And so when she pushed him, he was like, okay, well, she's physically touching me, so I have a right to defend myself. So he choked her from behind and put her in a Nelson. And he kept on repeatedly hitting her. And she finally got away. And this man, he's in a teaching position. He teaches young women permaculture, you know, and he's a self-proclaimed men's rights activist. And with a lot of the rhetoric from the men's rights activists, they talk about them being able to fight a woman back because they feel like it's uncalled for, stuff like that. And I think that and you know, when I tried to hold a community meeting and all of this stuff, I was blamed for being a troublemaker and also gaslit. And also my friend, the victim, she was asked to stand in front of him for a peace and reconciliation meeting. So that type of, and this is a nonprofit. So that's what's happening. And this is the DMV area. So that's what I think about when I think about men's rights. I really do think that like men do deserve rights, but I think that like someone that is victimizing other people cannot use a men's rights platform to harm people and to assault people, like assault women and sexually assault, victimize, all of these things. Like that is not all right. And I think that's one aspect of how those two are tied together.
Yeah, when I think of men's rights, I immediately think of the incel group. For those of you who don't know, it stands for like involuntarily celibate, which that already in itself is problematic. But the basically the main like rhetoric in that group um, is that like men have a right to have sex with women, and that because they haven't received that, then like they have to fight for their right to have sex with women, and like that is just going into the objectification of women's bodies, saying that they have a right to other people's bodies, and then here's like what is the most I think it like it's one thing to think about this individually, right, where you like have these thoughts that come in and then you're thinking about this individually, but then as you grow into a group and you have people affirming this and you have people saying that yes, I agree with you, this is what we should be thinking, it becomes even more dangerous. It snowballs into this is a thought, and then I'm allowed to take action on this thought. So I think really that's where like the danger comes with these men's rights activist groups.
It's definitely a spectrum. On one side, you got people who are trying to use it as an excuse to do whatever they want to do, shaming victims, promoting toxic cultures. And on the other end, you have people who are maybe talking about things like how men don't get therapy and how we try to shrug off depression and things like that. One side's much, much louder than the other on the internet for sure. Male survivors constantly get lumped in as if we're all MRAs. Aside from also all the gatekeeping that goes on in survivor advocacy groups to begin with. And having been a trained victim advocate for years, I see that from all sides. But yeah, it's a spectrum, but the loudest ones are the ones who are doing the worst damage. And unfortunately, they seem to have really loud, really large platforms and seem to be really good at social media, which is pretty scary. I've had folks come after me because they said that there's no way what happened to me could have happened. I must not be a real man. My status as a Marine Corps veteran was attacked, and a whole bunch of stuff. And there's this one wingnut out in, I think it's Finland, who just has an obsession with talking about me all the time in my case and telling me about how I am a sex negative activist because I didn't like being raped. Yep, that's an actual thing.
Is just such a heavy thing. And I think also when we think about men's rights, right, and this sort of goes along with what you were talking about, James, is like men who like report, right, like you have these voices, it's like this juxtaposition, like you have these voices being so loud in like one direction that is so like off, while men like are so much less likely to report because of toxic masculinity, which is like being manifest in that way. And it's just, I think, like MRA in that form is like another form of silencing, right?
Yeah, and again, I feel like that's patriarchy because that doesn't allow men to have consent. They're always considered always down for sex, and and that like this idea of men being quote unquote stronger, so they should be able to resist women that are considered weaker. That's totally ridiculous. Men are also victims of rape. Non-binary people are also victims of rape, and rape is rape, and we need to address it as such. It's totally ridiculous.
You know, it's absolutely ridiculous that they feel like they should have a right to a woman's body without consent. You know, I've been stalked by and stuff, and it wasn't pretty. You know, and I'm trying to figure out how in the hell did this man find my address? You know, he felt like he had a right to send mail to my house and didn't put a return address. I have no clue where he is at, but he finds me every time I move. And that's frightening because he wants something that I don't. What about my rights? I, I damn the it is.
Yeah, like when you saying what about your rights, like, I think behavior like that, right? Like a stalker is somebody who is often, trying to like silence or like consume you, when behavior moves to that level. And sometimes it's like, I'm trying to silence you about this particular thing, but I think it can be a lot more nebulous than that. Like you represent something, that I like fear or don't understand, or myself have like reaction, around, right? Like I think sometimes when you're a person who is like living, you know freely and as yourself, like even though it's not easy, like a lot of times, I think people who are so like just kind of backwards, right? And really, repressed. Like again, like that's another thing. Like we make something that everybody needs, like not accessible, and then there are people who want to take it, or like because they don't have it or don't understand it, want to silence it, like eradicate it. And I think like about sorry, train of thought. But I guess that was right on the bell. Right at 8 p.m. I had my eyes shut. I didn't see it come up on the screen, but maybe I just knew it in my head.
Yeah, thank you guys for this conversation. Like, I think we touched on some really important topics today. Just wanted to throw it out there again for our viewers who didn't join us last time. I am starting a sexual assault healing circle in conjunction with this talk. So anyone who is interested in joining this circle, you can reach out to me on Facebook at Mally Huang, or you can email me at sahealing at dreamcityco.com. dreamcityhealing.co. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all so much for
Bye, guys.
Bye. Drive safe, Tamika.
Before you leave, take a moment to feel into your body. Notice where you are experiencing sensation, if any, within your body. Now begin to reorient yourself to the room around you. Look to your left. Look to your right. Look in all directions, including behind you. And notice that you are safe here. Take a deep breath here. Notice the sensation of your feet and the soles of your feet. If you notice that your body is highly activated, take a few moments to stand up, move your arms and your legs, or go outside and take a walk, noticing the earth around you. Soften the focus of your eyes so you can come into your peripheral vision. If you're needing immediate support, please call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673. To dig into healing work with a somatic experiencing practitioner, you can find a practitioner local to you at www.traumahealing.org. If you want to work in a group, you can email Melly at sahealingcircle@dreamcityhealing.co or reach out to connect@dreamcityhealing.co if you need personal support in finding the resources that are right for you. Keep doing the work. It's worth it.